Good day once again, and you are welcome to my first lecture on web application development. So today's lecture is going to be Introduction to Web Application Development, because the foundation is very important. Those who do not have a very good foundation before starting their journey always face the difficulties of coming back to fill in the gap. So I wouldn't want you to be one of those, and for that reason I will try as much as I can to give you a very good and proper introduction to the whole area of web applications development, so that you can see how they all fix in together. And my first lecture in web application development is always theory, meaning that no practical. We may not be writing any code at all. The idea, the bottom line over here, is to make sure that you have a very good understanding about what is about to come. That is what you are going to be learning. You must have a very good understanding of it, and that's why I always make my first day of lecture to be purely theory, in an attempt to let you know what you are going to be learning throughout this course. Okay, having said that, I prepared just a very simple course outline here that will drive my discussions in my attempt to introduce to you what is web application development. Web application development over the years have undergone a series of remarkable changes. And these changes have changed a whole lot of the play in the scene, in such a way that if you are coming from many years behind, you may find the entire area so new to the point that you are paralyzed in your way to work with the application. So the way you process, the way we develop application nowadays has totally changed, just because many things have changed over the year. Okay. So what is a web application development? Web application development is a way to develop applications that works on the web. Application is a software, and because application is a software, all including web application, mobile application, Windows-based application, iOS application, even Android application, they are all software. But the environments where they work differs, and so we decide to give them different name. And for that reason, you know that Android application is that application that works on Android phone, while web application is that application that works on the web. Why mobile application are so to say works on mobile devices. You understand? But do not get me wrong, because even your web application, your web can as well work on mobile devices. So for we to be in an attempt to really clarify and make the whole thing clear to you very well, you must really dive into the technologies used to develop this application, and in that way you will be able to differentiate better what exactly is web application development. But if I will give a very good and proper introduction to web application development, I will tell you that a web application development is that application that is working and through the HTTP protocol. And if I say that, what I am saying in essence is there are a lot of protocols that you can use to communicate on the web. So the most important one we use for website is HTTP protocol, meaning hypertext transfer protocol, but I don't want to be going into all of those. So for that reason, I will head straight to what is our primary concern. Okay, just note that for now, let's describe web application development as the application that works on the web. And if I say the web, I mean internet. So if I say internet to be specific, I mean that which use HTTP protocol. Hope you understand. So once again, we will conclude that web application development, web application is that application that works on the web. Okay, so moving on further, we have front end. Now at this point, you must understand that for you to develop a robust web application, you must follow best practices that they use in the industry as at now. And for that reason, I need to explain to you that web application has been divided into two categories: One is front end and the other is back end. So as a web developer in training, you must know what are the technologies you'll be using for front end. But before then, what is this front end? Okay, let's do it this way. Let's say a very simple scenario. Let's assume you are working in a restaurant and where they sell food. So you want to serve food, but before you can serve this food, it needs to be cooked. It needs to be well prepared. So you can conclude that those who works in the kitchen, you can say, so to say, it's just an hypothetical example, those who works in the kitchen are working in the back end, and those who work directly in connection with the customer by requesting for their menu what they want and the quantities they want and how they should serve them. Do they want mineral? Do they want something like soft drink? Do they want something like different type of recipe? So somebody must be there to attend to this customer. Somebody must be there to know what type of meal do they want. Somebody must be there to tell them, okay, do you want this soft drink or that soft drink? All in all, somebody must be there to put the food on the table for them to eat. So those who work directly in connection with the customer by the will of asking for their requirements and giving them what they want, those you can say they are working in the front end. Meanwhile, those working in the front end cannot do the job alone. They must always go back to the kitchen because that is where the food is coming from. So in as much as you can say that the front ends delivers the job to the customer, then you cannot say the back end can be let out of the scene because that is where the food is coming from in the first place. So I hope with this my example you have a very, at least some level of understanding of the front end and the back end. But now let's come into the IT, into web application. Our front end, this is what the user is going to be working with, and because this is what the user is going to be working with, people who work at the front ends make use of such technology like HTML. What is HTML? Hypertext markup language, and that is the first thing you are going to be learning. Okay, and they also work with some other technology like CSS, which is called cascading style sheets. So I am trying to prepare a diagram for you here just to show you how everything connects together. So let us say that this box here represents our front end, and let us say that this one here represents her back end. And if you want to follow with my example I gave to you the other time, then you will know that the front end, these are the people that are serving the food, and the back end, these are the people working in the kitchen. Okay, so moving on further, I'm trying to let you know the tools that people working in the front end are going to be using, and they are going to be using such tool as HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and Bootstraps. All of these are going to be different courses on their own, which of course I will try as much as I can to make sure that you get to a level where you can work with them conveniently. So HTML, we call it hypertext markup language, and over here you are going to be working with tags, strictly tags, and it's just like your word processor or something like that you can use to prepare the content that people will be seeing on the web. And CSS, on the other hand, we call it cascading style sheet. It will be okay, cascading style sheet. Unlike back in those days where the designs is meshed together with the contents, this time around we separate the designs away from the contents. So while you can say that HTML represents the content that people see on the web, you can as well say CSS represent the template, the designs. So the two at the end will be meshed together to create a beautiful outlook for your web. JavaScript, on the other hand, is a scripting language that is going to be adding some lives to your web application. Like you want to do some validation, you ask a client to enter their age, and unfortunately he was entering the name that was wrong. So you want to make sure that they do not get the ability to send it to the server, which is the backend in this case, before you tell them that there is a mistake. Okay, so by now I hope you understand that front end is strictly dealing with nothing but our interaction with the user. Okay, now let's move to the back end. So what are you going to be working with in the back end? After all, you know that the back end is working in the back, just like people working in the kitchen. Okay, so coming back here, I try to show you some stuff. The back end, you are going to be working with some other type of scripting language, and the first one I call PHP, and you are going to be spending your time to learn PHP with me because that is what we are going to be choosing for this course. Meanwhile, PHP isn't the only scripting language that you can use to work at the back end. Okay, but it appears that most web and online make use of PHP, which of course is not bad at all. So I'm going to be teaching you PHP, but note that PHP is a scripting language, and if I say it's a scripting language, you can as well call it programming language, although programming language like Java and C++ are quite different from PHP. But PHP started just as a language, serving as a preprocessor for your web, but right now it grew into something you can really call a scripting language that we can now use to add some logic to our web. Remember, somebody must put the food on the gas cooker for it to be done. Sure, you understand? And beside that, somebody must make sure that all the ingredients are added. So you can think of these ingredients as different functions, objects that we are going to be calling in our PHP. Okay, so now you can PHP, just as I said, is using PHP is a scripting language that we are going to be using. But meanwhile, there is something very important that you must understand if you truly want to get what this PHP is all about. And for that reason, I will quickly draw a simple rectangle here. And this rectangle, I'm going to label it as nothing but what? But my web server. So this web server can't really be left out of the scene, just because the gas cooker, the ingredients, and every other thing must be housed together. Okay, so where they are housed together, you can call it as a web server. So to come to be more specific in computer language, you want to say that your web server is the one that gets the request from the front end, even before the PHP can have the advantage. And until you grab what this web server is doing, you may be finding it difficult to know where PHP comes into play. So let us say that this is our web server. Okay, now note that anytime somebody tries to submit a form, like they fill in a biodata form from the front end, the request is going to be sent all the way to the web server, meaning that the web server is the first thing that received the request from the front end. So because it's the first thing, it understands that a request is coming from here. But unfortunately, this web server needs to be processed. Okay, the request coming from the front end needs to be processed by the web server. So who would now process this request? That is the programmer working at the back end. He will be the one to process the request. And how will he process the request? The web server understands just one language, and the language of PHP in this case. So the web server understands the language of PHP. Other web server understand the language of Node.js, which of course is JavaScript. Other web server understand the language of ASP.NET. So by now, I hope you started guessing that we have many web servers, and many of these web servers understand different languages. But the web server that we are going to be choosing for our course is nothing but the Apache web server. So Apache web server understands the language of PHP, and for the programmer to be able to code, to be able to give some instructions to the web server, which in this case is Apache. That developer or programmer needs to understand the language of PHP that he will use to instruct the web server on how to undo the request coming from the front end. Okay. Meanwhile, we also have other web server, which of course I'm going to be showing you. Although the engine, so to say, engine X, some call it engine S, many people call it engine X. So you can call it a proxy that knows how to take our request and send it out to the one that we process, like that is a PHP processor. But I won't go more into engine X for now. Let's just stick with Apache. But just for the sake of completeness, I would love to share with you another web server that can really do the job that Apache is doing as well. Okay. Unlike the Linux web server, which of course is Apache in this case, Microsoft will have their own web server, and it is called IIS. So unlike Apache web server that understands the language of PHP, IIS does not, meaning that IIS, which of course is developed by Microsoft, has its own language that it understands, and this web server we call it IIS, and this IIS understands no other languages than .NET languages, and this .NET languages comes in different flames. So ASP.NET, you can say, will be able to be compiled and run some way somehow in your IIS web server. So meaning that if you want to use Microsoft technologies like C#, like VB.NET, like JHash or something like that, then you want to be considering using IIS. But in our home course here, I will be taking Apache web server because that is what you are going to be using for this course. And don't forget that Apache web server understands PHP language, and for that reason I will be choosing PHP scripting language for her back end. Okay, so right now you understand the language of the front end as it is sending requests to the web server, and the web server will have to, in our case now is Apache, will have to try to interpret your PHP language to the one the web server will really turn into a job that can be sent back, that can be delivered back to the web server. But even if you understand the concept behind the front end and the back end, it will still not be complete if we do not talk about the database server. Why? Because your database, your data that your application will be dealing with must reside somewhere. So we have something else that handles that for us, and we call it database server. So what is the database and what is the database server? Let's start from the database. A database, you can call it as a, let's just use the word repositories, where your data are stored. But to give a very good analogy to what a database is, you can think of your storage at home like your reservoir, like a place where you like a tank where you are keeping your water, so that when you want to use it, you don't have to go to fetch it again. Just open your pipe, your tap, and the water comes out. So you can think of that storage as your database. Okay, but it's quite unfortunate that this storage, this reservoir, this tank where you are keeping the water can only serve your house. But what if you want to serve the entire community? That means the tanks needs to be able to answer so many requests, and those requests comes from different houses. So how do you go about this? Then you improve your storage or your tank to have many entry points and exit points. Sorry, it can have one entry point, but it must have different exit points, meaning that those exit points can now serve different houses. So that is an example of a database server. Unlike a database technology that can only serve your house, in this case Microsoft Access, a database server like MySQL server can serve so many clients all at the same time concurrently, and that is what we call a database server. So the database server that we are going to be looking at for this course is going to be what? Is going to be MySQL. So it's a database server just because it can handle many requests at once, of course, and it continues to exist. So I will be showing you all of this thing on the cloud in my next lecture, but mind you, this is just an introduction to what a database server is. Okay, so moving on further, there are other database server. It's not just MySQL alone. There is Microsoft SQL server, and there is Oracle as well. So depending on which you choose, but for the sake of our own course, we are going to be MSSQL. We are going to be looking at MySQL. So now let's quickly do quick recap on what I have just discussed with you so far. I said to you that your web application development is going to be divided into two. We have the front end and we have the back end. While the back end developers are similar to people working in the kitchen of a restaurant, the front end developer are similar to people serving food to the customers. Okay, and I said to you that if you will be working in the front end, you want to be working with technologies like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and Bootstrap. And if you are working at the back end, you want to be working with technology like PHP, Node.js, ASP.NET. I use them. Okay, then you will not forget that this backend technology is just a scripting language that needs to be interpreted for the computer to execute, and that computer in this case which executes your backend code is nothing but the web server. But the web server comes in different flames, different types. Okay, and the one we are going to be looking at for this course is going to be Apache web server, which of course I'm going to be installing for you. Okay, then I said to you that your application will still not make a whole lot of sense without a place to keep the vital and important data like login credentials, like the biodata information, like all of those information that are peculiar to your application needs to be stored in a safe place. Okay, and that safe place is what we call a database. Just because people are going to be many that will be browsing our site, then we cannot just use database. We have to use database server. Why? Because database server can serve many clients all at once. And the database server we are going to be looking at for the sake of your course is going to be MySQL. Okay, let's say you are able to work with all of this conveniently. I will now graduate to the level of even teaching you how you can make use of framework that will let your work come to speed, such that we are able to manage all our code from one single repository, something like that. And we are going to be looking at Vue.js. So what is Vue.js? Vue.js is a framework that we are going to be using for our front end. That's later in the course when you get to the advanced level. Okay, and once again, we are going to be using another framework for our back end here that will be helping us with all of these PHP stuffs. And the one we are going to be considering is going to be nothing but Laravel. There are code igniter for PHP, Symfony, PHP, all of those, but I decided to go with Laravel because it has a whole lot of large community behind it that are seriously working on it to make it better day by day. Okay, and so if you look at the screen right now, then you will see that everything we are going to be covering in this course have already been well spelled out. So I want to believe at this point I've done a proper introduction to what we are going to be looking at in this course, and that is going to be front-end technology, back-end technology, and the database server, after which we graduate to the level of using framework like Vue.js and Laravel. And that is going to be the end of today's lecture. Then we'll want to start with HTML in my next lecture. Once again, thanks for watching, and we are really glad that you join us on this course once again at Code Tech. Thank you so much. God bless you. Have a nice and wonderful